Interesting that. Interesting that. All right, next comment. It says, I think these are two of the same. It says, why now? I think you have a point that is happening to more privileged of the underprivileged now, but I think there are other factors. We are seeing a rise in disability as a factor of COVID. Put a pin in that. Yeah, people include more privileged people and people simmering, bubbling horror after the 12 years of Tory austerity. Again, absolutely agree with you. But it's happening to more privileged people. But here's what I want to argue. Are they fighting for the right of disabled people to live, or are they fighting for themselves and people like them? That's all I want to know. Because I absolutely appreciate that people are feeling this threat and it feels scary and people are going like, oh crap, well, we need to move. Absolutely, fully, totally understand that sort of pain and fear that people feel. But if we could also agree that this has been happening for years now, and people have been suffering due to austerity, due to poor working conditions, housing conditions, people, the way that mental health has been treated in this country. Like, if we want to talk about COVID, let's talk about how the most affected by COVID, as said by Boris Johnson and his bag of cunts, it was said in 2020, 2021 that the most affected by COVID were black people and people from marginalized like races, I suppose. And as soon as that was announced, suddenly a different sort of people thought, well, everything's fine now. Why is that? I completely see what people are saying. I absolutely understand that people are feeling the threat. Again, that threat is due to the presentation, shout out to Megamind, of the way that this is being announced. I would then counter argue that, like, where were you? Like, it's not like this hasn't been talked about before. It's not like this hasn't been argued about before. It's not like people haven't been fighting for it. Who are those people, though? And it goes beyond race. It goes beyond class. It even becomes like environment stuff, because, and this is a bit of a niche conversation, but when we talk about, for example, like black people suffering and black people suffering from their peers and the rise of racism, for example, a lot of the focus is on cities and places. Major trigger warning for the story about to come up. There was, bless his heart, this boy who got maimed by a classmate due to racism. I actually don't know what the outcome of that story was, but it was a racist attack, and the mum was someone, like, she moved here from a different country. Don't ask me which country it was. And a lot of people was like arguing, like, well, why did you move to Wales? And I'm like, did she have a choice? But my point being of that little tangent is, why is the sympathy and focus on people of a certain background and not of others? It's what I'm trying to get at. That is kind of my point. And I think, going back to what I said earlier about the legitimate disabled person, let's pinpoint. I'm taking that pin out. We're talking about COVID right now. COVID, a lot of people have talked about it being the big divider. Like, if I know you're COVID safe or you take COVID precautions, then I have a very good idea what your politics are and who you are as a person. And you see me and Nusha, especially in this year of 2025, I would argue against that. Purely because I think a lot of people are leaning into politics that are so outdated, and they're leaning into practices that don't really serve us in this moment, because I think a lot of people are trying to deproblematize a lot of things that actually aren't very easy to talk about. Sort of things like mental health, for example. We talk about like, I don't know, depression, anxiety, BPDs coming into the conversation, fair enough. And it's not to pit people against each other or anything like that, but a lot of people are trying to sort of say, hey, this is a legitimate disability, i.e. I am valid too, blah 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 blah. Cool. Let's break that down a little bit though. Valid to who? Valid to who? And I think, and it's, oh, hello policeman, and I don't blame people for this, but I think what is happening is sort of the 2010s Obama era, everything is great, we got gay rights era of politics. I think it's sort of seeping into the things that we're doing right now. And I'm not saying that the representation and things like that aren't important-ish. Don't get me started on representation. We'd be here all day. But I think that we are taking lessons that we've learned from in 2010 and we're still trying to apply it here. I.e., a lot of people in our Lord's year of 2025, I'm not religious, but it's just a funny thing to say, are talking about, oh, I can wear a mask and I can still look sexy. Right. What's that got to do with anything? Like, I think the people that do kink have beat you to it, babe. Like, okay? And I understand sort of the, like, how it started. I understand how it devolved, because people, in public are losing social capital, so people are scrambling to get it, blah blah blah. Completely understand that. But what I'm trying to get at, I keep trying to pinpoint and hit, and I want this stream to be about, is when you have I fit in, I'm valid too, I'm legitimate. What you end up having is you have a binary. Because in order for there to be a valid in our society, that has to be an illegitimate. In order for there to be good, there has to be bad. And so when people do things like, I look sexy in my mask, what you accidentally do, or maybe on purpose, it depends on how much of a cunt you are as a person, is, oh, well, there's an ugly type of masker. There's an ugly type of disabled. And I think what I'm really trying to bring home is the sort of assimilation, the empowerment thing that people are trying to focus and force into. It is going to discard you at some point, because the parameters of legitimate and delegitimate are consistently changing, i.e. COVID. See how I brought that background? Because yeah, a lot more people are disabled now. A lot more people are asking for benefits. But what I think is happening is a lot of people are realizing that they are becoming the ugly part of disabled, and they are trying to get out of that. And you see it in the way that people are talking about what is happening with this latest green paper proposal, is that a lot of people are focusing on work. A lot of people are focusing on, oh, well, I work. I'm disabled and I work. Or I'm a freelancer. Or I'm a insert thing here. And if I lose PIP, then I'm going to be like those ugly disables. Again, I'm not saying that that's what people think forthright, or not everyone thinks this way. But what I am saying is that when those arguments are the only prominent ones, and those arguments are the only ones that are being touted and whatever in given all sorts of platforms, you are ultimately saying there is a hierarchy to the shit.